So in your opinion, because of the fact that they went through the mountains and they had to go through this whole tragedy, in your professional opinion, do you think there was another option for them? Like if they didn't want to go through the mountains, was there an option?
I did a little bit of research on this because I don't actually know a great deal about the Donner Party. My understanding is that they took a route that was not the common route. They didn't go over the Oregon Trail as most other people did. They took a route that had only been scouted out by a couple of people and nobody ever with wagons. So it seems to me that had they followed the traditional path, that they probably would have gotten to California just fine, because most of the time, most people managed to get to California and they didn't get stuck in the snow and they didn't have to cannibalize each other.
Yeah. Nobody want to ask a question?
Second question I would ask, did they have anything other than cannibalism, or was that like their final straw before they were eventually all going to die?
That's the final straw.
Yeah.
And it's not unlike, for example, the soccer players in the plane crash in the Andes.
Right.
Or what is the name of that? Nathan Philbrick wrote a book about a whaling ship. I can't even, In the Heart of the Sea, where at some point those people end up committing cannibalism. It is the very last thing, because people find it abhorrent and disgusting to do it. They feel guilty about it. It is not something that, Western Christianity looks kindly on. And then the guilt and the discomfort of having to explain to people afterwards how it is you survived.
Right.
Because there is, of course, a great deal of judgment attached to the fact that you ate people.
Yeah. It's kind of good that you mentioned Christianity, because I know at that time period, probably sometime before, there was a lot of conflict between the Puritans and the Quakers. Was there any sort of like religious background or conflicts that they might have experienced, in your opinion?
I suspect not. The conflict between the Puritans and the Quakers happens in the 17th century.
Right.
In the early founding of Massachusetts Bay Colony.
Right.
As far as I am aware, none of these people in the Donner Party are Quakers, and they might have been Congregationalists, they might have been the descendants of the Puritans, but we are past any of that kind of conflict. What we're really looking at, of course, this is the period of manifest destiny, and so everybody has a very romantic idea of going west, starting a new life, making your fortune, reinventing yourself, and probably not always thinking about how difficult the trip is under the best of circumstances.
Right.
And then when you start taking quite literally the path less traveled, you're just asking for it.
Yeah.
You just really are.
It was almost like a conscious decision that they were making.
Absolutely. They wanted to get there more quickly.
Yeah.
It was a very foolish. Think about it. These are people from the East Coast. They're not necessarily city people, but I don't think most of these people realized, and most people going west in general, I suspect, don't fully realize what they are getting themselves into. And it seems pretty clear that the Donner Party was particularly unprepared and did not really have an understanding of what it is they were getting into. And that's of course what makes it so terribly tragic, is it didn't have to be this way,
Right.
right?
Kind of going back to the dark side onto the cannibalism, knowing that also you're not a biology teacher, do you know of any risks that could be taking, like as in sickness, disease, with going through cannibalism?
That is a very interesting question. Well, let's assume it isn't radically different from eating any other kind of meat, let us say. So you wouldn't you would probably not want to eat people who died of some kind of disease, right? If people starved, then I wouldn't expect the meat to be contaminated. But if they had died because they had contracted some sort of a disease, that would not be a good thing.
Right.
I imagine you have to cook the meat well.
Yeah.
I don't know, that's a particularly funny question because you don't know this, I'm a vegetarian. So I've been a vegetarian for almost all of my adult life. So I'm assuming if you cook the meat well, it's okay.
Right.
That makes sense.
But,
Just-
but think about it, I mean, they are out in the middle of nowhere. This is the last straw for their survival.
Probably haven't showered in a while.
Oh yeah, it's totally disgusting, right?
Right.
It may not even have been possible to cook this,
Right.
right? Because you think about the people who crash on the Andes, you think about the people in Phil Brick's book. That's the true story on which the novel Moby Dick is based. I'm not sure they even have the wherewithal to cook it.
Right. Just it's almost like a castaway sort of thing, eating raw fish.
Yep.
Eat. So.
Which is not very healthy for you.
No, can't
But
be.
what I suspect is that if you get to the point where you're either going to eat or you're going to die, and maybe eating this meat, shall we say, could kill you, you know if you don't eat anything, you're gonna die.
Right.
You might die if you eat your friends and neighbors, right? So you
Yeah.
have absolute certainty of death versus possibility of survival.
Right.
You suck it up and you eat it.
Yeah. So even if you're a vegetarian.
Darn right.
As
absolutely.
as far as eating or dying, they're obviously going to eat to survive. Do you know if maybe, as far as your knowledge, there was a way that they had of picking who would be eaten first?
I don't know. I think they probably, what I think happened, and you will probably know this better than I from the work you've been doing.
Right.
I'm assuming that the first couple of times that people died, it was a very sad thing, they buried them and that was the end of it.
Right.
It's only when things get incredibly desperate. So I'm thinking that by the time it's desperate, the numbers in the party, because at some point the party splits off, I think, right? So we're talking about relatively small group of people. By the time they get to the point where it is eat or die, they probably just eat whoever dies.
Whether, even at that point, whether it be sick or healthy.
Right. And as best I know, and again, you will know this better than I, my understanding is that they ate people who were dead.
Right.
I do not think that they killed people who were almost dead
Right.
in
That
order
just-
to eat them for their own survival.
Right. That would kind of tie into like a religious, almost like sacrilegious, like to murder just for yourself to survive.
That's true. But I think in both the case of the Andes crash and the people on the whaling ship, I think there may have been points at which somebody was this close to being dead, and and they get the shot.
Give them a little shot.
Yeah, well, in the sense that we don't waste any more resources on
Right.
them, and so they're going to die anyways. And sometimes the people who know they're going to die and who know what is going to happen
There's no
next.
savior for them.
There's no saving them, and I suspect from what I've read, sometimes they are willing to accept that.
Right. Just save their fellow friends, their family. Almost like in Moby Dick, where they did like a, probably fiction, but they did like a roulette to decide who would be shot, just so more could survive.
Christianity is not necessarily supportive of cannibalism, but giving up your life for your friends and martyrdom is a different thing.
Right.
There's a certain nobility to that.
I mean, we probably should have asked this earlier, but what do you think was the main reason? Well, it was the Manifest Destiny, but there was many reasons for people to go to California. Why do you think the Donner's Party big reason was?
Part of it is about Manifest Destiny. This is about the time. Has gold been struck in California yet? It's pretty darn close.
It's pretty close to
right? So there's lots of opportunity there. There's land. There's possibility for gold.
Right.
People who are going with families are probably not going to. They're probably not going to be minors. But it's possible. So the thing is that there's just a lot of opportunity. And this period, Manifest Destiny is a very romantic notion about possibilities.
Right.
So it's not just that, it's not just that life stinks where we are and we want to move on. It's the belief that that the sky is the limit.
Right.
That you can
It's an unknown land. There's endless possibilities.
endless possibilities. So there's a certain and talking about Christianity, the idea that this is something that has been ordained, that we conquer this entire continent.
Right.
So maybe part of the problem for the Donners and maybe other people as well is that if you're approaching such an arduous adventure in that way, that you do not always weigh seriously enough the threats. Maybe you're thinking, well, this is sort of ordained that we are supposed to be doing this, and it will be fine. And maybe the question is, what does fine look like for you?
What does fine look like when you guys got
I
Absolutely.